I've had a Pyraminx Crystal for almost a decade now, but never actually solved it. I honestly forgot that I had it. But when Mike Beach asked if I'd be willing to review his newest Pyraminx Crystal mod, I had to blow the dust off and learn to solve it. It was actually really fun, and I'd highly recommend it to newer cubers who want something that's more challenging than a 3x3 but still pretty easy overall. A few weeks later, I got the Recrystallized from Mike. This is a straightforward shape mod of the Pyraminx Crystal into a rhombic dodecahedron. A rhombic dodecahedron actually has the same amount of faces as a regular dodecahedron, which is 12, so the Recrystallized is still basically a face-turning puzzle. But it still has dodecahedral geometry, so the puzzle shapeshifts a good amount when it's scrambled. Today, I'm going to show you the Recrystallized design, which is actually more interesting than it may seem. Did you know there's a whole Megaminx hidden inside of it? Then I'll look at how the puzzle was built and finished. Mike does a lot of experimentation with different finishing techniques, and the Recrystallized has very smooth looking parts. Finally, I'll scramble and solve the puzzle. As always, there's timestamps, but first I'd like to mention that the Recrystallized is the 16th entry in the 2023 Puzzle Advent Calendar series across different channels. Check out the playlist to see the other puzzles and subscribe to the person making tomorrow's video, linked in the description. Thanks again to Mike Beach for sending me this puzzle, and feel free to check out his Instagram and ask him any questions about polishing 3D printed puzzles. The Pyraminx Crystal is an example of a multi-shelled puzzle. This means that the mechanism actually consists of multiple puzzles stacked on top of each other. In this case, the base shell is a fully functional Megaminx. From this layer, the Megaminx corners continue outwards, while the Megaminx edges don't go past this shell and become fully internal. The outer shell consists of the Megaminx corners and these Pyraminx crystal edges which float above the Megaminx shell. This is actually a fairly simple multi-shelled puzzle. Some more complicated puzzles like radiolarians can even have 5 or more shells. If you'd like to know more, I'll link to Matt Bonner's excellent tutorial on multi-shelled puzzle design, where he actually designs a Pyraminx crystal partway through. The Recrystallized was printed on a Prusa Mark IIIs Plus using Polymaker ABS. You might notice that there's no enclosure, and it's true that Mike currently prints everything open frame, even ABS. I cannot stress enough, do not try this at home. ABS fumes are not good for you to inhale, and ABS typically prints significantly better in enclosure. It's actually impressive that Mike was able to achieve this level of quality with open frame ABS printing. One aspect that makes a big difference is the filament brand. This Polymaker filament, to my understanding, prints better in an unforgiving environment than cheaper ABS filaments would. But there's also ASA, which, while more expensive than ABS, is actually even more optimized for cold prints. So there's a spectrum of different filaments to choose from depending on your setup. This is a temporary setup for Mike, as he has a Prusa Mark IV with an enclosure on the way, and he'll be printing ABS on that after it arrives. I have an enclosure for my own Prusa Mark IV, but it's still in the box that it came in. I'll assemble it later, after the advent calendar is over and I've printed a few more puzzles so I can take the Prusa out of commission for a while. Once that's done, I also plan to print with Polymaker ABS. I'm really excited about switching to ABS from PLA because ABS is softer and therefore easier to sand. In addition, acetone dissolves ABS, meaning chemical smoothing is now an option as well. Mike has actually done a ton of experimentation with polishing ABS, to the point where I think he's pretty much doing something different for every puzzle, just to see how well new techniques might work. For the Recrystallized, Mike first sanded the stickered surfaces with 320 grit sandpaper, then 400 grit, and then wet sanded with 2000 grit. Finally, he buffed and polished the pieces using different sides of a nail buffer. And the resulting pieces look great. From the outside, the puzzle nearly looks mass-produced. You may have noticed that Mike didn't take any extra steps to give the pieces a black-colored finish. He explained to me that the reason sanded pieces turn gray is because the light scatters on the pieces in many more directions after being sanded with lower grit. When the pieces are sanded with increasing grits and then further polished smooth, the surface becomes significantly more even. So the light is reflected more consistently and the gray finish turns darker once more. I will say that this entire finishing technique actually sounds really simple compared to some other things Mike has tried. In the past, he's experimented by polishing with such materials as acetone, plastex, receipt paper, and most recently, superglue. From what he's told me, the superglue is actually turning out promising. The stickers are Oracal 651 and 6510, and I like this color scheme a lot. Mike tells me it's an approximation of the MF8 color scheme. The only concern with the stickers is these tiny ones. Stickers of this size can flake off more easily than normally sized ones, just because there's physically less adhesion. The really smooth finish goes a long way to help prevent the stickers from flaking off. In any case, Mike sent me spare stickers, so I should be fine no matter what. While the Recrystallized looks excellent, unfortunately it really doesn't turn as well as it looks. It's a bit stiff, but I wouldn't have any issues with it if that was all. The bigger concern is that the edges very easily go out of alignment and can catch on each other. This really slows down how fast I can make turns, since when a turn isn't going smoothly, I have to check whether edges are stuck, or if I just need to force the turn harder. What's really tantalizing is that 1 in every 10 or so turns, the puzzle is perfectly aligned and turns really smoothly. I'd enjoy the puzzle infinitely more if every turn worked as well as that. Regardless, I'm now going to scramble and solve the Recrystallized, right after this B-roll. The Recrystallized solves exactly like a regular Pyraminx Crystal. The way I'd solve it is by solving all of the corners like a Kilominx, then the first layer edges, then these sets, these sets, and finally the last layer edges. The Pyraminx Crystal is honestly a fairly simple puzzle to solve. So likewise, I'll be starting with the corners on the Recrystallized. After finishing the first layer corners, I decided to also put in the first layer edges and then the other edges next to the first layer. This would be easier to do now rather than doing it later when all of the corners are in place, so movement is more restricted without breaking anything up. Before I received the Recrystallized from Mike, I had to go back and figure out how to solve my Pyraminx Crystal, which I never did back when I got it many years ago. It was straightforward all the way up until the last few edges when I had to look up an algorithm to flip two of them at once. Of course, with the Pyraminx Crystal, it's not a new puzzle by any means, so there's a fair amount of resources online for it. But some of the puzzles I make introduce brand new solving concepts which aren't analogous to anything else that's out there. So there's not going to be any online resources that can be of help. I had this dilemma with my next puzzle to be released in just over a week from now. It's a square 1 type puzzle, and while I was able to make heavy use of square 2 algorithms in many steps, there were some other steps and situations that were insanely difficult to figure out. My first solve of that puzzle took 12 hours, but having figured some techniques out, I can now get it solved in about 2 hours, or quicker if I get lucky. It makes me think that I need to come up with a long-term solution to generate algorithms for puzzles that introduce new concepts. I'm sure there's already programs for this, but I haven't checked any out just yet. It's a minor concern, and I was reminded of it when thinking of the Pyraminx Crystal and my history with it. Now that all of the Pyraminx corners are complete, it's time for me to solve the remaining edges. The edges are solved with basic sledgehammer moves, and then for the final layer I found an algorithm online which flips 2 edges orientations after they're all permuted. Well, if you're still watching at this point, you're one of the 10% of viewers who stays for the entire video. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you for feedback. 4 videos ago, starting with the curved 2x2 experiment, I changed my video format significantly, along with my entire setup. What are your thoughts on the new content style? Is there something you'd like to see more of, or less of? Should I be going into some aspect in more detail? Or is there something that's consistently boring you? Of course, I'm always trying to continuously improve my videos myself, but at the end of the day, I want to make something enjoyable and interesting to watch for the viewers, so let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks. The tiny white sticker did come off, so I had to reapply it. It's the only sticker that's ever come off, but it's come off 3 separate times. The original one fell off and wouldn't stick anymore, and this replacement has fallen off twice, but seems to be sticking a little better overall. All of the other stickers on the entire puzzle have been perfectly fine. Finally, the Recrystallized is solved. It took me about an hour and 10 minutes from start to finish, which is quite a while. For reference, I can solve the regular mass-produced Pyraminx Crystal in under 10 minutes. The two puzzles solve exactly the same, just on the Recrystallized the edges get caught a lot, so turns are much harder to make. Other than that, honestly, the puzzle does turn really well. It's just difficult to properly align everything before starting the turn. Thanks to Mike for sending this over, and make sure to check out the rest of the puzzles in the 2023 Advent Calendar along with subscribing to the person making tomorrow's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.